It all began on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Or, at least, it felt ordinary at the time. I was sitting in my apartment, nursing a glass of red wine and scrolling aimlessly through my phone, flipping between social media updates and messages I hadn't gotten around to replying to. The day had been long, a typical workday that had dragged on too slowly, leaving me feeling drained. What I didn't expect was that this night would change everything. The thing about Sophie and me was that we had always been inseparable. We'd grown up in the same small town, attended the same schools, shared the same hobbies, and, to be honest, we had always been each other's constant. Where I went, Sophie went. We were the kind of friends who had inside jokes no one else understood, who could finish each other's sentences without missing a beat. As a child, you don't realize the magnitude of such friendships. You just assume it will always be that way. When I started dating Adam, it didn't seem out of the ordinary to Sophie. He was a nice guy, easy to get along with, and we all shared the same friend group. Adam wasn't just my boyfriend, he quickly became one of us. Sophie liked him. She liked him a lot, actually, but I never thought anything of it. We had talked about everything, our fears, our aspirations, even our relationships. Sophie was the kind of friend who offered unwavering support, or so I thought. I never saw any signs that would have made me doubt her loyalty, and I trusted her with every fiber of my being. Adam and I had been together for 2 years. It wasn't perfect, of course, what relationship ever is, but it felt real, and that was enough. He was kind, funny, and attentive. He made me feel seen and heard in ways I hadn't experienced before. He wasn't the kind of person who would make grand gestures, but he always made sure I knew I was important to him. Our weekends were spent enjoying quiet moments together, whether we were binge-watching movies, cooking dinner, or just walking through the park enjoying the simplicity of each other's company. Then, one evening, everything changed. Sophie had been acting a little distant lately, but I didn't think much of it. She was going through some personal stuff. Work was stressful, and she had recently broken up with her boyfriend. I assumed she was just working through her own emotions and gave her the space she needed. So when she invited me out for drinks that night, I thought it would be a good chance to catch up. We went to our usual bar, a cozy, dimly lit place where we'd spent countless nights in each other's company. Sophie was quieter than usual, but I brushed it off, figuring she was just tired. We talked for a while, about work, about life. And then she casually brought up Adam. She asked how things were going between us, which wasn't unusual, but then she started asking questions that seemed a bit too pointed. "Does he still take you on those cute weekend trips?" she asked, a note of something strange in her voice. I shrugged, not thinking much of it. "Yeah, we're planning one for next month, actually. You know how he is with surprises." Sophie smiled faintly, and then, after a long pause, she said something that caught me off guard. "I hope he's really good to you. You deserve someone who treats you the way you should be treated." I raised an eyebrow at her sudden change in tone. Sophie had always been encouraging about my relationship with Adam. "What's that supposed to mean?" She took a deep breath and looked down at her glass. There was an uncomfortable silence between us, one that seemed to stretch on for much longer than it should have. It was as though she was struggling with something I couldn't quite grasp. "I'm sorry, but I need to tell you something," she said, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper. "Adam and I? We've been seeing each other." I felt the world tilt beneath me. My brain refused to process what she had just said. I must have misheard her. There was no way she was saying what I thought she was saying. What? I stammered, my voice rising with a mix of disbelief and anger. I could feel my heart racing, the blood rushing to my head. "What do you mean? Are you joking?" Sophie's face was pale and her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together on the table. "No, I'm not joking. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake, but it happened. I never meant for it to happen. We've been seeing each other for the past few months." The words felt like a punch to the gut, each one landing with more force than the last. My chest tightened as if someone had suddenly wrapped a fist around my lungs. I didn't want to believe her. I didn't want to accept it. But the way she couldn't meet my eyes told me everything I needed to know. "How long?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm, despite the storm swirling inside me. "A couple of months," Sophie admitted, her voice barely audible now. It felt like the room had closed in around me. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, loud and deafening. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. How could this have happened? How could she betray me like this? And Adam, how could he? He had been my rock, my partner, my best friend, and my boyfriend, and now both of them had done something I could never have imagined. I don't know what to say, I whispered, though words felt useless in the face of this betrayal. The tears that had threatened to come earlier finally broke free, but I wasn't sure if I was crying from sadness, anger, or the feeling of being utterly humiliated. Sophie reached out for my hand, but I pulled it away, the contact feeling like a violation. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "You're my best friend, and I love you, but Adam and I, we connected in a way that I didn't expect." My mind spun. How could she say that? How could she have let this happen? And how could she think it was okay? I had trusted her with everything, and now she had betrayed me in the worst way possible. "I need to go," I said, standing up abruptly. I can't do this right now." I didn't wait for her to say anything more. I turned and walked out of the bar, the cool night air hitting my face as I tried to clear my head. My heart ached, and I could feel the weight of their betrayal pressing down on me, suffocating me. How could they both do this to me? My mind kept asking that same question over and over, but there was no answer that could make any sense of it. When I got home, I shut the door behind me, and for a long time, I just sat in the dark, letting the tears fall. I cried for the friendship that was now lost, for the relationship that had been shattered, for the trust that would never be the same. I wasn't sure how to move on from this. I wasn't sure how to forgive either of them. All I knew was that everything had changed in a single, devastating moment. I never spoke to Sophie again after that night. Not in person, not over the phone, not through texts. There were no angry words exchanged, no final confrontation. I simply cut her off, just as I had Adam. The hardest part was realizing that the person I had loved and trusted more than anyone had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way. That was the hardest part to accept. The months following that painful night were a blur of restless emotions and sleepless nights. I thought, in the beginning, that I would find a way to wake up from this nightmare, that one day I would open my eyes and discover that everything had just been a bad dream. But each morning, reality was waiting for me. Right there in front of me, staring back in the form of my empty apartment, the absence of Adam's voice, and the overwhelming silence that seemed to fill every corner of my life. Sophie's betrayal weighed heavily on me, but it was Adam's betrayal that gnawed at my insides, like a constant, insidious ache that wouldn't go away. I had trusted him in a way that felt almost sacred. When I think back on all the times we laughed together, all the quiet moments we shared, it feels like a distant memory, as though it belonged to someone else's life. How could he do this to me? How could he let this happen? How could he be with Sophie, of all people, knowing that she was my best friend? My heart twisted every time I thought about it, and I hated myself for feeling this way. I didn't want to care. I didn't want to be consumed by the anger and the hurt, but I was drowning in it. I went through the motions in those early days. I continued going to work. I kept up with my responsibilities. But everything felt distant, like I was watching my own life from the outside. Every time I saw a couple laughing together or holding hands, I felt the sting of betrayal. Every time I passed by a place that Adam and I used to go to, it was like my chest tightened, and I had to swallow back the lump in my throat. For a while, I didn't tell anyone what had happened. I couldn't. Who would understand? How could I explain that the two people I loved the most had done this to me? I didn't want pity, and I didn't want people to ask questions that I couldn't answer. So I stayed quiet, buried my pain beneath a mask of indifference that fooled no one. My friends noticed the change, of course. They saw how withdrawn I became, how the light that had once been in my eyes dimmed. But no one pressed me, no one pushed for answers. I appreciated that, but at the same time, I was beginning to feel more alone than ever. Weeks passed, and I found myself starting to heal, in a way. It wasn't a smooth process. There were days when I would catch myself thinking about Adam, about us, and my chest would tighten all over again. I missed the little things, His laugh, the way he would smile at me from across the room, the warmth of his hand in mine. I missed the version of myself that had been in love with him, but the more I allowed myself to mourn, the more I realized that what I had with him wasn't something I could go back to. It wasn't the love I had imagined it to be. It was a love built on a foundation of secrets, of lies, and of broken trust. As painful as it was, I knew that I had to let it go. Sophie, on the other hand, was a different story. She had been my best friend, the person I confided in, the one I turned to when everything in my life felt out of control. To have her betray me like that was almost unfathomable. The anger I felt toward her was sharp, like a constant ache in my chest. But at the same time, there was a part of me that felt guilty for hating her. After all, we had shared so much of our lives together. She knew everything about me, my fears, my insecurities, my dreams. She had seen me at my lowest points, and I had seen her at hers. How could I just erase her from my life completely? I struggled with the idea of forgiveness. A part of me wanted to pick up the phone and tell her how much she had hurt me, how I couldn't understand why she had done what she did. I wanted to scream at her, to cry and ask her how she could have been so heartless. But another part of me knew that it wouldn't matter. The damage had been done, and no amount of words could undo it. It wasn't just about the betrayal itself, it was about the years of friendship that had been built on a fragile illusion. When I thought about everything we had been through together, it felt like a lie. She had known how much I loved Adam. She knew how important he was to me. How could she have done that? How could she have let this happen? As the days turned into weeks, I found myself trying to move on. I kept busy. Too busy, in fact. I threw myself into my work, into hobbies I had neglected for too long. I took up painting again, something I had done as a child but had stopped after life became too demanding. I spent my weekends going to new places, trying new things, anything to keep my mind occupied. I met new people, and slowly, I began to rebuild a sense of normalcy. But every now and then, I would catch myself thinking about Sophie and Adam, about the life they were building together. And it hurt. It hurt in a way that I wasn't sure I would ever be able to fully let go of. But I had to. I had to let go of them, of the past, of the version of myself that had been in love with both of them. I had to learn how to live without them in my life, and slowly, I did. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I would lie awake, my thoughts racing, wondering what Adam was doing, if Sophie was happy. But the more time passed, the more I realized that I had no right to hold on to that pain. It was theirs to carry now, not mine. It was during this time that I met someone new. His name was Luke. He was kind, intelligent, and funny in a way that made me laugh even when I didn't feel like it. We met at a mutual friends gathering, and at first, I didn't think much of it. I wasn't looking for a relationship. I wasn't even sure I was ready for one. But Luke was different. He didn't try to fix me or rush things. He gave me space, and over time, I found myself enjoying his company more and more. He didn't ask questions about my past, and I didn't offer answers. He just let me be who I was, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. Luke and I started spending more time together, going for coffee, taking long walks in the park, talking about everything and nothing. He was easy to talk to, and slowly, I found myself opening up again. I shared little bits of my life with him. Stories of childhood adventures, random thoughts, silly things that made me laugh. He listened, never judging, never trying to fix anything. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something. It was a step forward, a glimpse of a future I hadn't allowed myself to imagine in months. Still, there were days when I would think of Adam and Sophie and a familiar pain would return. But now it was different. It wasn't an all-consuming ache anymore. It was a dull throb, something that I could live with. I had finally come to terms with the fact that I would never get the answers I wanted from them. I would never understand why they had done what they did. And I was okay with that. The need for closure, for answers, began to fade. Time, as they say, heals all wounds. It wasn't a perfect healing. There were scars, deep ones, that would never truly go away, but they weren't as painful anymore. They were just a part of me, part of who I had become through the process of moving forward. And as I stood at the edge of this new chapter, I realized something important. Time didn't heal the betrayal. It didn't make the hurt disappear. but it did give me perspective. It gave me strength. It gave me the clarity to see that while Sophie and Adam might have taken something from me, they hadn't taken everything. I was still me. And life has a way of moving forward, whether we're ready for it or not. Even when you're tangled in the wreckage of betrayal and loss, the world keeps turning, the days keep passing, and yet, the reality of what happened with Sophie and Adam lingered like a dark cloud that occasionally hovered above my head. I had managed to find some sense of normalcy again, or so I thought, until the moment I saw the wedding invitation. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I had just come back from a morning meeting and was still adjusting to the rhythm of the day when I found it on the kitchen counter. It was in a plain white envelope with no distinguishing marks except for a name written in delicate script. For a moment, I stood there, staring at the envelope, as though some part of me knew what was inside, but I didn't want to admit it. Sophie and Adam were getting married. I almost couldn't breathe. My heart skipped a beat and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. I stood there, my fingers gripping the edge of the counter, unsure whether I wanted to open it or throw it straight in the trash. How could they do this? How could they move on so easily while I was still tangled in the mess of our past? But I knew I couldn't avoid it. So I ripped the envelope open and pulled out the card inside. The elegant script confirmed it. Sophie and Adam were getting married, and they wanted me to be there to celebrate with them. The invitation felt like a slap in the face, a cruel reminder of everything I had lost. It wasn't just a wedding invitation, it was a statement. A statement that they had moved on, that they had somehow managed to put the past behind them and were now starting a new chapter, a chapter that didn't include me. I don't know why I had been so shocked. After all, they had been seeing each other for months. Their relationship had been growing steadily, and it was only a matter of time before this step came. But it didn't make it any easier. It didn't soften the blow. And yet, a part of me, buried deep down, felt the tug of curiosity. The question that had been gnawing at me for months, how were they? How were they together now that everything had come to light? Did they have what I had once believed we had? Was their love real? Or was it just another lie built on the foundation of a broken friendship? I sat down at the kitchen table, the invitation still clutched in my hand. The words seemed to blur in front of my eyes, but I couldn't look away. I had to make a decision. I could either ignore the invitation, pretend that I hadn't received it and avoid the whole situation, or I could go. I could show up. I could face them, confront everything that had happened. It was tempting to throw it all away, to not give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt, but something inside me told me that I needed to go, that I had to face this chapter head on if I ever wanted to fully close it. The next few days were a mix of emotions. I kept coming back to the invitation, weighing the pros and cons in my mind. I talked myself out of going more times than I could count, but something about the invitation gnawed at me. Was it about closure? Or was it about proving something to myself, proving that I could stand tall in the face of their happiness, that I could walk into their wedding and not fall apart? I couldn't decide, and the indecision only made everything feel worse. But as the wedding day grew nearer, I found myself unable to let go of the thought of going. I had to see it. I had to see them together. It wasn't about wanting to get back at them. It wasn't about making a dramatic exit or causing a scene. It was about standing up for myself. About walking into a room filled with people who didn't know the story behind the smiles and vows and showing them that I was okay. I had moved on, and I wasn't going to let them see me crumble. So, I decided to go. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know if I would walk in and feel that familiar rage bubbling up or if I would fall into some kind of strange, silent sorrow. But I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't stay away. I had to go, not for them, but for me. I had to prove to myself that I could let go, that I could stand in that room and not feel like the world was collapsing around me. The wedding was set to take place in a charming little chapel just outside of town. One of those places that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. I had never been to a wedding there before, but from the pictures on the website, it was the kind of venue that screamed romantic and intimate. I could already picture them. Sophie in a flowing white gown, radiant and glowing, and Adam standing at the altar, looking every bit the dashing groom. I couldn't imagine them together without feeling a pang of pain, but there was something else there too. A sense of resolution. This was the moment. I had to face them. Face what had happened and let go once and for all. The day of the wedding arrived and I spent hours trying to figure out what to wear. I had never cared so much about an outfit before, but for some reason, this day felt different. I wanted to look my best, but not too flashy. I didn't want to stand out, but I didn't want to blend in either. In the end, I settled on a simple, elegant dress. Nothing too extravagant, but still something that made me feel confident. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my hair, I realized something. For the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of control. This was my moment to reclaim some dignity, to show the world that I wasn't the same person I had been all those months ago. I wasn't the broken-hearted girl who had been betrayed. I wasn't the girl who cried herself to sleep at night, mourning the loss of two people she thought she could trust. I was stronger than that. I had to be. The drive to the chapel was quiet. Almost too quiet. My mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead, but I tried to push them aside. When I arrived, I found myself standing outside, staring at the beautiful building. I wasn't sure what I expected to feel, but when I stepped inside, I felt a strange mix of emotions. The air was thick with anticipation, with joy, and with a hint of sadness that only I seemed to carry. Sophie and Adam were already at the altar by the time I entered. The ceremony was starting, and I took a seat toward the back, hoping to remain as unnoticed as possible. As I watched Sophie walk down the aisle, her eyes shining with happiness, I couldn't help but feel a stab of something. Resentment, anger, even envy. How could she look so perfect, so sure of herself? How could she stand there, knowing what she had done to me, knowing that she had stolen something that could never be replaced? But as the ceremony progressed, something strange happened. I realized that the anger I had carried with me for so long wasn't as all-consuming as it used to be. It was there, still, lurking in the background, but it didn't take center stage anymore. The longer I sat there, watching them exchange vows, the more I began to feel something else. Something I hadn't expected. A sense of peace. I wasn't ready to forgive them, not by any means, but I wasn't going to let their happiness steal my own. I wasn't going to let them define who I was or what I was capable of. I had already been through the worst of it. The past was behind me, and though it would always be a part of me, it didn't have to control my future. Watching them stand there, smiling at each other with such certainty, I realized that I was the one who was truly free. As they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. I had come here, I had faced this moment, and I had walked out of it stronger than I had been before. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. And with that, I made a decision. This wedding, their wedding, was a chapter that I had to close. It wasn't mine to be a part of anymore. I wasn't the girl who had been betrayed. I wasn't the girl who had been left behind. I was someone new, someone stronger. And this chapter? It was finally over. The days following Sophie and Adam's wedding were strange. I had expected some kind of closure, but the truth was, life didn't hand out closure like a neatly wrapped gift. It wasn't like I walked out of that chapel and immediately felt a wave of relief or resolution. There were still moments when I caught myself thinking about the past, but there was something different now. A sense of distance, of space that hadn't been there before. I wasn't exactly healed, but I wasn't consumed by the pain either. It had become a part of me, but it no longer defined me. After the wedding, Sophie reached out to me a couple of times. The first time, I had ignored her texts. It wasn't anger that kept me from replying, but more of a sense of finality. I didn't need her in my life anymore, not in the way I once had. I didn't need the person who had betrayed me to keep trying to patch things up as if nothing had happened. So, I let the silence linger. But a few weeks later, another message from her popped up on my phone. This time, I opened it. She was asking me to meet for coffee. She wrote, "I know it's been a while, but I really want to talk. I miss you and I want to make things right between us. Please, let's talk." I stared at the message for a long time. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. An apology? An explanation? What could she possibly say to make things right? In the end, I decided that meeting her wouldn't change anything. The wound she had created had already begun to heal on its own, and I wasn't sure if reopening it was something I wanted to do. It wasn't that I hated her, not anymore, but I couldn't forgive her. Not yet, and I wasn't sure I ever would. The invitation to meet lingered in my mind for days. Finally, I decided to respond with something simple, polite but firm. I think we both need some time apart. I don't think I'm ready for that yet. And that was it. She never responded, and I realized that I had already made peace with what had happened. It didn't require another conversation. It didn't require anything from her. I had already let go. As for Adam, I had no contact with him since the wedding. It wasn't like I was avoiding him. It was simply that I had nothing left to say to him. He had made his choices, and he had chosen Sophie. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just done. The thought of him didn't bring up the rage it once did. It was just another chapter in my life, one I was putting behind me. But despite all of this, there was a lingering feeling of unfinished business, a feeling that I still had something to prove, not to them, not to anyone else, but to myself. I had endured so much, and I had managed to make it out the other side without losing my sense of self. But part of me wanted to walk away from this chapter with my head held high, knowing that I had come out stronger and more in control than I had been before. One morning, as I was sipping my coffee and scrolling through social media, I saw a post from Sophie. It was a photo of her and Adam, holding hands, smiling at each other. It was a picture-perfect moment, one that most people would have looked at with admiration. But for me, it was a reminder of what I had lost, and what they had taken from me. I didn't feel anger when I saw the post. I didn't feel jealousy. I just felt nothing. And it was in that moment that I realized something important. I had finally let go. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need them to acknowledge me or apologize to me. I had moved on. And that was enough. But even as I came to this realization, there was still a part of me that wanted to do something. I wanted to prove to myself that I was stronger than their betrayal, that I could walk away from all of it, not just emotionally, but physically. And that's when I decided on the gift I would give Sophie, a wedding gift she would never forget. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want revenge, but I wanted to do something that symbolized the final closure I had been seeking. It was a gift of irony, wrapped in the layers of everything I had learned since their betrayal. Something that would say, "You didn't win. I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I'm better than okay." A week later, I walked into the upscale boutique in the center of town and picked out the perfect gift. It was a small, elegant box, a jewelry box with intricate carvings on the outside. It was delicate, but expensive, and its beauty was undeniable. Inside, I placed a simple piece of jewelry, a bracelet, a symbol of connection. The bracelet itself wasn't particularly special. It was a simple silver chain with a small heart pendant attached, but I attached a note to it, one that would make it unforgettable. I had spent hours crafting the note. I wanted it to be perfect. And it had to be subtle, something that wouldn't seem obvious at first. It had to be something that would catch Sophie off guard, something she wouldn't expect. I thought long and hard about the message, and in the end, I kept it simple. Sometimes, we forget that the things we take for granted are the ones that matter the most. I hope this helps you remember. I signed my name at the bottom and sealed the envelope. The day the gift was delivered was a strange one. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I sent it, but when I heard nothing back, I felt an odd sense of satisfaction. It wasn't about the reaction it would provoke. It wasn't about getting a message from her or an apology. It was about me. It was about me standing firm in my own truth. It was about showing Sophie that I didn't need her to validate me. I didn't need anyone to validate me. A few weeks passed without a word from her. I wasn't surprised. I had known she wouldn't reach out. The gift had been my final statement, and it had done what I needed it to do. It had given me the closure I had been searching for all along. Sophie and Adam had gone on with their lives. They were married now, and they were building their future together, just as they had planned. But I was building my own future, too. One day, as I was walking down the street, I ran into Sophie unexpectedly. She was walking toward me, her face lighting up with a smile when she saw me. I wasn't sure what I expected, but her smile didn't reach her eyes the way it once had. There was a tension in the air, something unspoken, but we both kept walking. "Hey," she said, stopping in front of me. I just wanted to thank you for the gift. It was unexpected and thoughtful." I looked at her for a moment, unsure of how to respond. There was so much I could say, but I realized there was nothing left to say. We had both moved on in different ways. We were both different people now. "You're welcome," I said quietly, and with that I walked past her, my heart steady in my chest. The air around me felt lighter, freer. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need her apology. I was no longer tied to the past, no longer tethered to the people who had broken me. As I walked away, I realized that the true gift wasn't the bracelet or the note. It was the peace I had found within myself. The closure I had been seeking had never been something they could give me. It had always been within me, waiting to be unlocked. And now, for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. I didn't know what the future held, I didn't know what would come next, but I did know this. I was no longer the person I had been before. I was stronger, more self-assured. I had learned how to let go, and I had learned that my happiness didn't depend on anyone else. I had reclaimed my own narrative, and that was more than enough.